Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With the grace of Almighty Allah, to a great extent, the atmosphere of Qurbani is widely experienced in our country. Many homes, many communities, animals are kept and slaughtered in the backyards. Children look forward to this and engage in all the arrangements and all the preparation with great enthusiasm. And Alhamdulillah, this is something commendable and it should be increased. And this is the means of keeping this great ibaadah alive for future generations. However, there's a great need for us to move from the mere atmosphere of fun, entertainment and enjoyment to achieving the true spirit of Qurbani. In Surah Hajj, Almighty Allah speaks about the ibaadah of Qurbani in a few verses. And when we look at those verses, it will bring within us that spirit that is required from us and our families at this time. Allah Rabbul Izzah says, وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا لِيَذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَى مَا رَزَقَهُم مِّن بَهِيمَةِ الْأَنْعَامِ. For every ummah, we prescribed an act of sacrifice so that they recite Almighty Allah's name over the cattle that Allah had given them. So in this verse of the Noble Quran, the purpose of Qurbani is to take the name of Allah on the sacrificial animal. And taking the name of Allah is so important that if a person deliberately leaves it out, the Qurbani will be invalid and the animal will be completely haram, no matter how healthy and costly it may have been. So the purpose is not just to slaughter the animal, rather it is to follow the command of Allah, the injunction of Allah, by taking the name of Allah when slaughtering the animal. Allah Rabbul Izzah says, فَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهُ وَاحِدٌ فَلَهُ أَسْلِمُوا. Your Rabb is one Rabb, and therefore to Him alone should you submit. Allah Rabbul Izzah mentions the quality of submission when discussing Qurbani. And we understand its relevance to the ibaadah of Qurbani. Some people feel that instead of slaughtering so many animals, Muslims should rather carry out other forms of charity, which will be of greater benefit to humanity. And there are those, na'udhu who say that slaughtering animals are inhumane and cruelty. And therefore Allah is commanding us, at this point we need to understand that we are being commanded to leave out our intellect, our reasoning, put it aside, and submit wholeheartedly to this command. Other forms of charity are in its place, and they have their places in the deen of Islam. Allah has commanded us in this particular days to do a certain act of worship, and that is what is required from us. In many instances in our lives, our intelligence and reasoning may prompt us to do something or take us in a certain direction, but it is contrary to the command of Allah. And that is where we need to submit to the command of Allah and the teachings of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we need to abandon our own reasoning at that point. The quality of submission, the quality of submitting to Allah, that is the cornerstone of this deen, the cornerstone of the life of that Nabi in whose footsteps we are following, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah Rabbul Izzah says, إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ. When his Rabb said to him, submit, what did he say? أَسْلَمْتُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. I have submitted myself to the Rabb of the worlds. And after that, Allah Rabbul Izzah says, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُخْبِتِينَ. And give glad tidings to those who humble themselves before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Rabbul Izzah gives glad tidings to those who submit and humble themselves. If you bring this quality of submission in your life, there will be great goodness in your life, in this world, and in the year after. Every person might think that I possess the quality of submission, but this may not always be the case. Therefore, in the verse of the Noble Quran, Allah gives us a few points to look at. That الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِّرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. Who are these people, the people of submission? They are those whose hearts are filled with awe when Almighty Allah is remembered. If a person is comfortably traveling in his vehicle at a high speed on a freeway, And suddenly he catches sight that in the distance coming up there's a speeding camera. He will immediately press brakes. He will slow down his vehicle. And the question is, why does a person slow down his vehicle? The answer is obvious, because there's a camera there. The camera is going to flash. He's going to pay a fine. So we as believers, when we hear or when we remember the command of Allah, we need to immediately apply the brakes of Iman and thereby save ourselves from the wrath and the displeasure of Allah. And this was the salient feature that was found in the lives of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas describes Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu as kana waqafan inda kitabillah. He would immediately halt. He would press dead brakes when the Quran was recited. And this type of response indicates that such a person had a very high regard and attachment to the respect and the importance of deen. Allah Rabbul Izzah says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَالصَّابِرِينَ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَهُمْ. And those who adopt patience on whatever befalls them. And in different verses of the Noble Quran, Allah informs us that as humans, we will be tested in this world. No person, no matter how wealthy he may be, will live a test-free life. Some calamity, some difficulty will befall a person at some point. And those are the moments in which we need to be patient. And what we need to do, وَالْمُقِيمِ الصَّلَاةِ, and establish salah. The importance of salah and the high position that it holds in our deen, we all are fully aware of it. It's very unfortunate that at times, we tend to get so caught up in things around us, even on Qurbani day, with the atmosphere, and even neglect our salah with jama'ah or at the appropriate time or entirely. And this shows that a person has not truly acquired the spirit of Qurbani. And then Allah Rabbul Izzah goes on to say that وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, and those who spend in our path from that which we've given them. We're all acquainted with the great virtue of spending in the path of Allah. And undoubtedly there are many who spend big amounts. People sponsor masjids, wells, institutes, all of that. However, at times we neglect certain extreme important avenues of spending. For example, we may have an employee or a relative who is going through financial difficulties, yet we do not regard helping this person as an act of virtue. Whereas this may be the greatest form of virtue for us. A simple act through which we can gain reward during the season of Qurbani is to give a live animal to our employees, our relatives, or any person who cannot afford to buy an animal, and allowing them to also enjoy with their families the spirit of Qurbani. Allah Rabbul Izzah, after stating the four qualities of those who humble themselves and submit to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْبُدْنَ جَعَلْنَاهَا لَكُمْ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ. And the big animals of sacrifice, like the camels and the cows, we've made them amongst the symbols of Allah, the symbols of the deen. There are certain things that are termed as sha'air, symbols or features of Islam. And these are such things that are symbolic with deen, and merely seeing them, it reminds you of the deen of Islam. The Quran Majid, Masajid, Azan. So in this verse of the Noble Quran, the animals of Qurbani are also from the sha'air of deen. And in another verse of the Noble Quran, Allah Rabbul Izzah says, وَمَن يُعَذِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever respects the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it emanates from the piety of the heart. So, just as we normally show respect to the azan and other symbols of deen, in a similar manner, the Qurbani should be given the same respect, done with the same passion. And when doing it with a passion, we should not get confused between the atmosphere of Qurbani and the spirit of Qurbani. The spirit of Qurbani must be upheld at all times. And doing it with the spirit demands that it not be done to boast amongst one another. To take pictures of your animals and say that look at how big this one is and look how big that one is. And Allah Rabbul Izzah says, لَكُمْ فِيهَا خَيْرٌ. There is much goodness for you in this. Allama Alusi, the great commentator of the Quran Majid, has explained that you will gain benefit in this world and reward in the year after. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, بِكُلِّ شَعْرَةٍ حَسَنَةٍ For every strand of hair on the Qurbani animal, there is reward. The rewards of Qurbani in the year after are indeed very great. But apart from that, even in this world, a person gains benefit by eating the meat, by using the skin. This was not the case in the previous nations, as a fire would come and devour their sacrifice. So Allah Rabbul Izzah says, فَذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهَا صَوَافٍ, and recite the name of Allah over them when they are lined up for sacrifice. فَإِذَا وَجَبَتْ جُنُوبُهَا فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا, and then once their sides fall to the ground after being slaughtered, eat from them. So the days of Qurbani are days in which the normally meritorious deeds of fasting actually become haram. And this is because these are days in which Allah extends His invitation, His hospitality to everyone, every believer. Allah is the most generous. He's the most generous host. And to serve His guests only the best, the meat of the Qurbani, of the animal. When we are invited to somebody's home, then we ensure we eat at least a little from every dish prepared, so the host feels that there's a variety of things and the guests ate from everything. The same is with regards to the hospitality that Allah is presenting to us. That is the Qurbani animal. On the occasion of the farewell Hajj, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sacrificed 100 camels for Qurbani, and he wished to honor the invitation of Almighty Allah and gain the tremendous blessings contained in the meat of the animal. But how could he eat from 100 camels? And not wanting to be deprived of the blessings and showing his appreciation to Allah, he ordered that a piece of meat of every one of the 100 camels be placed in a pot and cooked. And thereafter he ate from and sipped the gravy of the pot. And in that way he secured in just a few morsels the blessings of 100 camels. And he also showed us how eager he was to eat the meal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has presented to us. So can we ever imagine attending the function of a prominent person, a dawat in our community, and taking our own food along to the table? And if the person questions us, how could we ever tell him that the food has a smell, or we prefer our own food? Never. Allah deserves more honor than any member of society. So let us eat at least some of the Qurbani meat and understand that it is what Allah Himself is feeding us on these days. Allah Rabbul Izzah says, وَأَطْعِمُ الْقَانِعَ وَالْمُؤْتَرِ, and feed the one who is contented and the one who wishes to receive. Thus, Allah Rabbul Izzah says, كَذَلِكَ سَخَّرْنَاهَا لَكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Thus we've made them, the animals, subjugated to you, so that you may be grateful. And an important aspect when it comes to feeding the needy is that we should give them good meat. Not that which we don't want to eat ourselves. On one occasion, it is mentioned that Utbah bin Farqad, rahimahumullah, came to visit Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu with a few huge baskets filled with exclusive sweet dishes. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu inquired regarding the baskets, Sayyidina Utbah replied, I brought some food for you to partake. Undoubtedly, being the Amir al-Mu'mineen, fulfill the needs of the people from the early hours of the morning. And hence, when you return home, you may partake of it. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu then asked to open the basket. And as he opened it, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said that I insist that when you return, you should give every Muslim one basket of this. And Sayyidina Utbah then took an oath and replied, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, even if I spend the wealth of the entire Qais tribe, it will not be enough. And upon hearing this, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said that if this is the case, then I have no need for it. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu requested for his food to be brought, which was a bowl of gravy that had dry bread and tough meat, and he began eating it with relish. And Sayyidina Utbah says that I stretched my hand towards a white piece, which I thought was the hump of the camel. However, when I began chewing it, he says it was the tendon or the muscle. And he says I took a piece of meat and began chewing it, but was unable to swallow it. It was so tough. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu realized that Sayyidina Utbah might think that he does not have the means to eat good quality food. And he said to him, Utbah, we slaughter a camel every day, but the fat and the good pieces of meat are given to the Muslims who need it, who come to us, whereas the neck is for Umar. Whereas the neck is for Umar. This is a reminder for us. Allah Rabbul Izzah says, لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهَ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ. It's neither their flesh nor the blood that reaches Allah, rather your taqwa that reaches Him. Taqwa refers to the spirit of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submission to His command. And this was the actual and the continuous sunnah of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, which needs to be inculcated in these days, since the act itself is not the purpose. If a person makes the act itself the purpose, it will become mere ritualistic and an event of mere fun and entertainment. May Allah grant us the understanding.